What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, and today discussing more takeaways from New York Giants OTAs. Now, the Giants are practicing today, but it's closed from the media, so we won't get a ton of clips. We'll get the practice report later today, and of course, over here on FSG, we will have a practice report and recap for you guys tomorrow or later today, even potentially. But I want to focus in on one specific storyline that has been slowly emerging from OTAs for the last week or so, and that is tight end Theo Johnson looking bigger and really standing out during team drills. Now, Theo Johnson, of course, fourth-round pick for the New York Giants last season, tight end out of Penn State. He stands in at like a ridiculous 6'6", 236 pounds, or like 260 pounds, something crazy. Just a big hulking dude. Apparently, even bigger, even hulkier now. All of a sudden, he showed up to OTAs and looks like an absolute unit. So I want to talk about him, his potential this season with the Giants as he enters year 2 of his career. Discuss some of the things that he did last year that made him so intriguing as a rookie, and why I think that a breakout season could be underway for Theo Johnson in 2025. So let's waste no more time. I'm going to go ahead and dive into this, reading off an excerpt from Connor Hughes of SNY, talking about OTAs, and he kind of does an OTAs impressions and report after every practice that the media is available to attend. And this is what he wrote about Theo Johnson. Quote, Theo Johnson looks bigger. The tight ends ran through individual drills in front of the media, and the second-year tight end stood out. The Giants have told everyone how high they are on him. Johnson developing into a weapon would be huge for the offense. He didn't make much noise in team drills on Wednesdays, end quote. So team drills on Wednesdays didn't make much noise. However, he has stood out in terms of his size and his abilities in other drills, individual drills. And I would really like to highlight what Connor Hughes said there about the Giants' feelings towards Theo Johnson, because this is something that I've seen several sources report. The part where he says the Giants have told everyone how high they are on him. We have heard a lot of buzz about how excited the New York Giants are about Theo Johnson. They are way higher on him than the rest of the media and the rest of the league seems to be. But Theo Johnson seems to be a player that Joe Schoen is pretty confident he found something in as a mid-round gem. And some of the reasons why I think Theo Johnson is due for a little bit of a breakout in year 2, first and foremost, he started to play really well down the stretch prior to his season-ending Lisfranc injury. Now, some of the stats that I think are going to really blow you away, over his final 5 games, the rookie tight end finished with at least 3 receptions every week with no less than 35 yards in each contest, including 2 games with 50-plus yards. For a tight end, those are very respectable stats. In fact, that's high quality statistics right there for a tight end, especially as a rookie. So for Theo Johnson to have been playing that way over his last 5 games, that final stretch of his season before it was cut prematurely, I mean, what if he had those extra weeks to continue to develop and continue to rise up the ranks? I think he could have continued that pace and become an even better player by season's end. But as a result of the injury, his rookie season was cut short, and now we're looking ahead to year 2 with plenty of intrigue for a tight end who really did flash some promise as a rookie. So like I said, he's stood out during OTAs. He's looked like the big hulking man that he is, and he's starting to develop a connection. And I think that's the next part of this topic that I really want to dive into. Russell Wilson. If there's 2 things that we know are true about Russell Wilson, number 1, he throws an elite deep ball. How many times have we discussed that on the channel? His deep passing accuracy throughout his career has always been among the best. And last season, he graded out as the highest deep passing quarterback in the NFL. We've gone over those stats a million times, and they're not necessarily applicable to the Theo Johnson discussion. The second thing that we know about Russell Wilson, and that's where I was going with this, he loves to feed his tight ends. Tight ends always perform well with Theo Johnson. Last year was Pat Freiermuth. Several years ago, it was Will Dissly with the Seahawks. It was Jimmy Graham with the Seahawks. No matter what tight end has been plucked into a Russell Wilson-led offense, that tight end finds ways to be productive because Russell Wilson, being a shorter quarterback, I think is probably one of the factors that leads to this. And also being a smart quarterback, knows where his safety blankets are. And when he has a tight end over the middle as a safety blanket, he likes to utilize that tight end. And Theo Johnson as a 6'6", 260-pound tight end, roaming across the middle of the field, also possessing a great amount of athleticism to get vertical up the field. But primarily speaking, just being that safety blanket for Russell Wilson, I think he's going to see a significant increase in target share this season. A lot of you have asked us in the comment section, who's going to be that guy that steps up opposite Malik Neighbors? What is this offense really going to look at? And, of course, we've talked about Darius Slayton, and Slayton's a good player, and he signed on to be the WR2 at $12 million per season. It's a good contract. I like it. Wan'Dale Robinson last year had 90-something targets. Can he replicate that this year? I've said I think that's kind of unlikely considering how many mouths there are to feed in this offense. But I really do think there is an outside chance Theo Johnson ends up being that next leading guy. I think WR1 Neighbors lock in. WR2, yeah, sure, that's probably Darius Slayton. But that third target share, that third highest target share on the team, whereas last year it was Wan'Dale Robinson stepping up as that WR3, so to speak, that third option in the passing attack. This year, I really could see it being Theo Johnson because Russell Wilson's previous dependency on the tight end position throughout the history of his 10-plus year, 10-plus Pro Bowl career. So Theo Johnson's not only primed and positioned for a breakout second season because he himself is a good player who started to play really well down the final stretch of his rookie season, but also because of the changes to the Giants offense, he should be featured more and targeted more by Russell Wilson. And on top of that, let's add a third layer to this. So far through OTAs, the play caller has not been head coach Brian Daboll. Instead, it's been offensive coordinator Mike Kafka. Now, that's to the excitement of many fans. That's to the dismay of many fans. Depends on where you stand on Mike Kafka. Honestly, I'm kind of in the middle of it. Whatever decision Brian Daboll thinks is best, I want him to roll with, and he's going to live and die by it since it's a do-or-die season for him anyway. But Mike Kafka calling the plays, if you do recall that 2022 season, the tight end position was featured quite heavily in the New York Giants offense in a way that it really wasn't featured as much over the last two seasons. Now, a couple things that we know are true. The 2022 offense is the best Giants offense that we've seen in the Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka, Joe Schoen era. That's without a doubt a fact. On top of that, the Giants had a much different tight end room, but they also did have an emerging rookie in 2022, and that happened to be Daniel Bellinger. And he's going to be part of this conversation as well before we wrap up, because I do have some thoughts on where he fits in. But in that 2022 season, I remember Daniel Bellinger being a focal point in the offense prior to, of course, having that orbital injury. But he was making plays as an intermediate route runner, short option, receiving option. They would have him get creative with him and have him take some handoffs. If you remember, he had a rushing touchdown against the Green Bay Packers in London. So they were really creative with their usage of Daniel Bellinger. And when you look at the way they use Daniel Bellinger, trying to lend his athleticism to make him a more dynamic playmaker from the tight end position, Theo Johnson is all that and more. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's more athletic. He's arguably a better blocker and a better receiver. He is a player that I think complements Daniel Bellinger well because they have some overlap in their skill set, but also he's kind of just a bigger, supercharged version of him, and now, of course, younger. As Daniel Bellinger enters the final year of his contract, we do have question marks about whether or not he's even going to make this roster since he was almost entirely phased out of the offense the last season. But Theo Johnson became the focal point last year. And considering Mike Kafka could be calling the plays again, he could become an even larger focal point in 2025, considering what we've seen from Mike Kafka-led offenses in the past. So a couple factors really working in favor of Theo Johnson. He's got a tight end that loves to target, he's got a quarterback that loves to target tight ends, and he has an offensive coordinator potentially calling the plays who knows how to deploy a versatile tight end skill set. So a lot in store working for Theo Johnson, on top of the fact that he himself just is a good player and has looked good at training camp. But let's talk about the rest of the tight ends in this room. The first and foremost being Daniel Bellinger. One thing that I'll say is Brian Daboll likes 12 personnel quite a bit, but he hasn't run it a lot over the last couple of years because the Giants haven't had tight end depth. But if you look back at his time when he was with the Buffalo Bills, of course, coaching Josh Allen most famously, but also helping develop guys like Dawson Knox and some other offensive weapons over in Buffalo, he ran a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets. That's 12 personnel in case you're unfamiliar. The last couple of years, the Giants haven't run a lot of 12 personnel. They tried to in that 2022 season, but again, depth has been a little bit of an issue. When they traded for Darren Waller in 2023, the expectation was this offense would feature a lot more 12 personnel. But Darren Waller didn't play well, got injured, and ultimately retired after a season with the New York Giants. So now that the Giants have Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger is kind of fighting for this role of being the second tight end in 12 personnel. However, he's also playing on the final year of his contract, and if released, the Giants would save over $3 million in cap space. So it complicates things for Daniel Bellinger. Essentially, Bellinger needs to ball out in the summer of training camp practices and preseason in order to maintain his job with the New York Giants. Otherwise, he could be released and find a new home elsewhere. But I'll say the potential of a Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger two tight end set is kind of exciting to me. I've always been pretty high on Daniel Bellinger. I thought he looked really good as a rookie in that aforementioned 2022 season. I was a little bit disappointed by his lack of usage in the offense over the last 2 years. And I'm hoping that Theo Johnson emerging as a starting tight end doesn't mean that Bellinger gets pushed out of the door, but instead means Bellinger and Theo Johnson can work together to have their talents equally maximized in a 12 personnel led offense. That's what I'm hoping to see, especially when you consider the Giants' question marks at the receiver position. Maybe having an extra tight end on the field sometimes wouldn't be such a bad idea. So I'm hopeful that Bellinger could keep his job. We'll ultimately have to see. Again, it's going to depend on how he performs throughout the summer. But I do really like Daniel Bellinger, and I'm really high on Theo Johnson, really excited about him. Now, the last thing that I want to note here is this kind of ties into the Bellinger conversation and also the Theo Johnson conversation. Thomas Fidone II, do not forget about him. That is a 7th-round draft pick that the New York Giants made this season, Nebraska tight end, who coming out of high school was the top-ranked tight end in the country. Now, that was many years ago, of course, and that was 2 ACL tears ago, of course. So that's why Thomas Fidone ultimately wound up a 7th-round draft pick. But prior to the NFL draft, he was not expected to go round 7 or as a potential UDFA, as most round 7 picks are. He was mostly viewed as a potential 4th, 5th, 6th round pick. Most projections had him in the 5th, some had him in the 4th, and others had him in the 6th, but not many had him going all the way down into the 7th. So for a 5th round tight end talent to pair up with Theo Johnson, a 4th round tight end talent, you're seeing how much value the Giants are expecting to get out of their 4th round tight end in Theo Johnson. Their 7th round tight end in Thomas Fidone is really a 5th round talent. And he could end up emerging this summer. That's another name that I'm going to say keep an eye on. As we discussed in the OTA Week 1 report and recap, Dane Belton is a guy who we circled pretty early in this offseason as a player to keep an eye on. And he's performed tremendously so far throughout OTAs. We also talked about Theo Johnson, but I'm telling you right now, as we get closer to the summer practices and training camp, keep a close eye on Thomas Fidone. Because if Thomas Fidone performs well, it could have significant ramifications for Daniel Bellinger, even Chris Manhertz, another tight end on this roster, and of course, on the 12 personnel set with Theo Johnson. Could that second tight end instead of Daniel Bellinger become Thomas Fidone? That's a question that I have, and I'm excited to get the answer to it at the end of July once training camp kicks off and gets into full swing. So not only was this a Theo Johnson discussion, but I did tie this into an entire tight end discussion, the depth chart that the Giants have at tight ends, the players that they have on this roster, who's in, who's out, who could be the starter, who could be the second tight end in those 12 personnel packages. Definitely a lot of different ideas to float out there, and I'm definitely curious to hear all of your thoughts down below in the comment section on who you think will be the odd man out of this tight end room and what your expectations are for Theo Johnson. Again, my expectations are pretty high. The Giants seem like they have really high expectations. Joe Shane has said so on multiple occasions to the media, and we've gotten several reports that behind the scenes, the Giants are really high on Theo Johnson. So I'm very excited about his potential. I think he's athletic. I think he's strong. And I think that he has a perfect situation to really thrive in the second season of his career. So the fact that he showed up to OTAs looking bigger, though, is kind of insane to me. I always thought that he looked like the biggest guy on the field outside of any offensive defensive lineman last season as a rookie. But hey, if he added some more strength to his frame, if he, with the foot injury, just decided, okay, let me hit bench all day long every day. Okay, if he's just an absolute Hulk, like I said earlier, in the middle of the field for the Giants, well, he can definitely be a significant weapon for them if that's the case. So really excited about Theo Johnson, the former 4th-round pick. Think he's in store for a pretty big step forward this season. Really looking forward to seeing what he's able to do throughout the rest of OTAs and, of course, as we get deeper into the summer during training camp. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go New York Giants.
Perfect.